Joining us now from the nation's capital to discuss this, Elliott Abrams. Elliott, the Senior Fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. He also was former National Security Advisor and a former Special Assistant to President George W. Bush. Elliott Abrams, we welcome you now to America's Forum.
Good morning.
Elliott, let's get right to it. Based on your expertise in foreign policy, how are the president's decisions internationally affecting Americans and America's standing in the world?
I don't think there's much doubt that America's standing has declined. Pardon me, our allies no longer have the same faith in us they did in past decades. Our enemies are really not in Tehran or Beijing or Moscow. They're really not afraid of us anymore. And the allies feel kind of alienated. They feel they're not as close as they used to be to the United States. So I think there's really been a decline, and of course that hurts our national security interests.
Well, Mr. Abrams, John Bachman here. In our message as we move forward and what the Obama administration decides to do here, is it more important that we prove something to our allies that we're committed to, promoting peace and stability in the Middle East, or is it more important that we actually get involved in Iraq for Iraq's sake and our own interest in that country? What's the more important objective here?
Well, the objective has got to be to defend our national security interests, and in the end, if people don't like it because we're doing that, that's too bad. That should be the touchstone for us. But if we do that actively and intelligently, then we're going to be showing our allies that we're willing to act to defend ourselves and our interests. And we'll be pushing back against enemies who wish us ill. The problem we've got today is, what happened almost a year ago. The president's decision on Syria. Remember, we had the red line on chemical weapons, and he walked right up to doing something, and then he walked away without advance notice to any of our allies. So people just think they can't rely anymore on his words when he says he'll do this, he won't do that. That experience of the red line on chemical weapons was a really bad one.
So that red line painted apparently Elliott Abrams with disappearing presidential ink, and that leads both friends and foes to doubt the resolve of the current president. But Elliott, as we're looking now, the new acronym ISIS splashed across newspapers in all of our coverage, and the talk that ISIS is, in the words of the Washington Times yesterday, quote, hell-bent on establishing a new nation state beyond the borders of Syria and Iraq to serve as a training pad, a launch pad for attacks against this country. If you had to rank foreign policy concerns, would ISIS and establishment of that 21st century caliphate rank at the top of the list?
Yeah, it would really be up there right now. These are people who are real enemies. They really hate us. They'd like nothing more once they've established their little caliphate than to attack the United States. This happened, when they had a place in Afghanistan that the Taliban protected. This is in the middle of the Middle East, and it's a big collection of people, a minimum 12,000 of them. They've obliterated the border between Iraq and Syria. And if they get a safe haven there, they're going to go after Lebanon, they're going to go after Jordan and Israel, and ultimately they're going to come after us.
How long do you think it would take for them to establish that? Because we've heard from folks like General Hayden saying that Iraq is essentially gone, and you have the Kurdistan basically asserting their own autonomy in the region now, and you have the fighting that's going on here. How long do you think it would take, Elliott, to actually have ISIS establish this geographical area? Because it seems like they're kind of on their way, and they've already done so.
Well, I think they have, and the question really is whether, is this the top for them? Can we push them back, or is it going to expand now? I think they're kind of overextended. Let's say there are 10 or 15,000 of them. That's a huge area, including large parts of Iraq and Syria. We've got to help people fight back, and there are a lot of Syrians who want to fight back, and a lot of Iraqis. We need to give them the tools they need. We need to help the Jordanians and others to begin the pushback so that we look at this period, the summer of 2014, as the period in which ISIS reached its apogee and then began to fall.
Elliott, we were warned essentially by General Michael Hayden on this broadcast the other day not to think of ISIS as an organization that is 10 feet tall, but obviously it appears the momentum is with this new group. Now we take a look, and you mentioned earlier, legitimate national security interests of the United States. I take a look at where it appears ISIS is headed next to violate the border with Jordan. They've already said that they have the king of Jordan as one of their primary targets. What does this portend for Israel? Because we've seen in the past that Israel doesn't always wait patiently for the lead of the American nation before acting in its own national security interests.
Well, I think the Israelis are ready to act to protect themselves and no doubt to protect Jordan. The thing is, I think General Hayden is right. They're not 10 feet tall. So far, the amazing thing is the way the Iraqi army has collapsed. No one has really fought them. The Jordanians are a hard target. Israel's a hard target. Turkey's a hard target. The Kurds are. They have real armies ready to fight. So we need to help the Israelis and the Jordanians. But I agree, if these guys think that they're going to take on Israel, Israel will fight, and it will go across the border. The Israelis have bombed in Syria something like 20 times already. So they're ready to go.
It seems though, you mentioned that, and in many ways, a lot of the work is being done for the United States. That, you mentioned the Kurdish army they're fighting against, and the Israeli army is certainly going to sit in their hands and not do anything. And so if we provide that support from outside to countries like Jordan and Israel, is that really a better option then, Elliott, as opposed to standing up and trying to support al-Maliki?
Well, it's not Maliki. He's not going to be of any help, I think, really. But yeah, we need to help outside, the Turks, Jordanians, Israelis, but we need to help inside. We need to help the Syrian rebels, the non-jihadi nationalist rebels, who the president has just been unwilling to help, President Obama, I mean. And we need to find the Sunnis, who worked with us in Iraq 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago as part of what was called the Sunni Awakening. We need to see if we can get them back into this fight, because they're not ISIS people. So there are people in Syria and Iraq, and they need American support, but they also need to trust us, and that's going to be a problem. They need to know we're with them and we're going to stay with them. And I think right now, that degree of confidence in the U.S. is pretty low.
Elliott, our current Secretary of State, John Kerry, within the past couple of weeks, essentially spoke of an alliance of convenience with Iran, dealing with what's transpiring in Iraq. Given the fact that this administration has shown what appears to me to be indulgence with the Iranian pursuit of nuclear weapons, does it make sense for this so-called alliance of convenience to come to fruition with Iran?
No, it's a real danger. The Iranians wish us ill. The Iranians don't want the same thing we do in Iraq, not really. They want to control Iraq. And they've been behind Maliki in these years now when he's been trying to rule as a Shia dictator. We do not have common interests really with Iran. And I really worry about this idea, which I think President Obama has had since 2009, that, we're going to kiss and make up and we're going to have a much changed relationship with Iran. The Ayatollah hates the United States. The Iranians are enemies of the United States, this Islamic Republic. The idea that we're going to have some kind of alliance with them, I think, is, first of all, wrong, and secondly, it just really terrorizes all of our Gulf allies in Israel. They think it's crazy.
You mentioned Gulf allies, and we know we've got about a minute and a half left, Elliott. This can be a very precarious situation, because the question becomes, who is funding groups like ISIS? And is there not funding from some of the Arab petro kingdoms going in to these groups that, again, don't have the best interest of the United States at heart, and that's putting it mildly?
My belief is that there's a lot of money coming from the Gulf, but I don't think for ISIS, I don't think it's the government. It's not the king and the government of Saudi Arabia. It's not the government of the Emirates. It's the billionaires who are sprinkled all over the Gulf. And what those governments have to do is a much better policing job to make sure that private citizens are not moving funds into these groups. And then we've got to come in and we've got to work with them to fill this vacuum by helping direct their aid and our own, so that we're really supporting Sunni groups in Syria and Iraq that are fighting ISIS.
We'll have to leave it there. Elliott Abrams, we thank you for your insights today on foreign policy, and we look forward to visiting with you again in the near future. So that's Elliott's take. We're interested in yours. What role does the United States have? What of the Obama foreign policy? Why don't you tweet us your thoughts at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum.